Kanga Audio.
A quick thanks before we start the show. Filmmaking Confidential, the book, is now an Amazon.com and Audible.com bestseller. I just want to say thank you to all of you who ordered it and for your support. If you haven't yet picked it up and you want to learn my filmmaking secrets, Filmmaking Confidential is for you. It's available wherever books are sold in most countries around the world. Order by visiting Audible or Amazon. To find out more, check out filmmakingconfidential.com and stevebalderson.com. Thank you. I'm Steve Balderson, and you're listening to the Filmmaking Confidential podcast. In this podcast, we meet with filmmakers, writers, actors, artists, and other notables. Today's guest is pioneering gay vlogger Davey Wavey. With nearly 300 million video views in over 160 countries around the globe, Davey Wavey has become one of the leading online voices for the queer community. Since he began shooting videos in 2007, he has become a sex-positive activist, using his life experiences to spread messages of love, acceptance, and humor. His innate curiosity about love and sex formed the basis for his career of making videos. His new channel for adult erotica is Himeros TV.
You started making educational content in 2007, or was it not educational at first?
Well, educational is a very generous description of what I used to make in 2007. But also, like, if we rewind the hands of time, YouTube in 2007 was like, there was no expectation of a video beyond something you would record in your webcam. And so I would sit in front of the camera and I would talk about like the books I was reading or what was going on in my life. And it was all terribly uninteresting until I think my eighth video, which was about my masturbating neighbor. I was living in Toronto. And it went viral for, like, at the time what viral was, and people started sharing it and then subscribing to my channel, and very quickly an audience kind of grew out of that video. And that's when I made a pivot to create content that was maybe a little bit more in touch with the audience. And it was like a recognition of the responsibility and maybe opportunity that was being presented in that moment. But I would say my videos are a combination of like educational, but packaged in a way that's silly or sexy or fun.
And you went there just because that's where the market and the audience told you to go. You hadn't really thought of that prior to that?
I went there because that was what was interesting for me. There wasn't, I mean, because we talk about now, we're like, oh, the market and the audience, like there wasn't people that were making careers out of YouTube. Like there wasn't a formula for doing this. There was no possibility of making money off of it. So Google had not bought YouTube yet. There were no ads. None of that had happened. And so I was like, okay, I'm going to do this thing that's fun. And this is what I'm interested in talking about. And it was, content about being gay with a kind of sexual twist on it. As I got older, the content became increasingly more sexual. But yeah, that was the journey.
Did you have a religious upbringing?
Like super religious. Yeah, it was Roman Catholic.
How was that?
Oh, terrible. Yeah, it was terrible. I was raised Roman Catholic. I went to Roman Catholic high school, Catholic college, which I did by choice. I was just like, oh, I must be a sadomasochistic human being. And it was really tough, especially, being gay and being out. But in hindsight, it's also one of those things that, like, had I not gone through that chapter of my life, there's zero chance that I would be doing the stuff that I'm doing today. That, like, you can just kind of connect the dots between my Catholic upbringing, the shame that I had to deal with, and then creating a website that envisions a world in which gay and bisexual men experience their sexuality with joy. I'm doing that for the world because that's what I'm also doing for myself. So it's really a selfish endeavor when you come down to it.
Did you seek a sex therapist or any tantric coach prior to starting this channel?
Yeah, I've worked with more kind of like traditional sex coaches, not people along the lines of like how we collaborated with Brad and why I wasn't quite ready for that chapter of my life yet. But kind of more traditional sex therapy.
Did you, okay, so having grown up that way and having the shame, were you truly ashamed of the feelings and things that you had and were going through? Or did you feel like you were okay and why is everybody else nuts?
I wish that was the case. No, I was really, when you're 14, 15 years old and it's really hard to step outside the like walls that have been built for you. And it just didn't occur to me that like the priests would be wrong, that the religion teachers would be wrong, that my parents would be wrong. Like if everyone that you respect and everyone that has authority is telling you one thing, the same thing, and you feel different in your heart, I'm attracted to boys, it did not occur to me that they might be wrong and I might be right. Like, so, my teenage years were spent largely trying to resist who I was, as I think is the case for a lot of religious kids that are brought up in religious households.
Sure. Yeah. Well, when do you think it was that you began to see that there were other people out there like you?
It was in middle school that I realized I wasn't the only gay person. So initially I thought everyone was gay. I didn't know what the word was, but I was like, oh, I'm attracted to the boys in my elementary school. I'm sure they're attracted to me too. And when you're in elementary school, I don't know, I think sexuality is just very fluid and I would kind of have these little mini relationships with my like guy friends. And then as we got into middle school and the hormones really started to kick in, they were like, yeah, I'm not doing that with you. And I was like, oh my God, I must be like the only one. And we went to a family party and there was a guy there who brought his husband. And my mom was like, so this guy has a husband instead of a wife and it's called being gay. And just this light bulb went off and I was like, oh my God, that's what I am. I'm not the only one, thank God. And it's called being gay. And how
old were you when that happened?
I think that was in 6th grade. Yeah.
Wow.
Well, we didn't have the internet though. It wasn't like I was like on YouTube seeing examples of other gay people. Will and Grace wasn't on TV yet. Like I didn't know.
So then, okay, so you had this like little seed planted of this is what I am. This is, then tell me more of the trajectory. Like what happened next in the years to follow that?
Well, then I was like, well, this is who I am. And I sure as hell, I'm going to resist it with every bone of my body. And despite my attraction to men, I'm still going to have a wife and kids. And so I had a girlfriend for a little bit. I dated her for 7.5 months and never even kissed her. And I was like, okay, I can't do it. This isn't going to end well. So I came out of the closet when I was 16 to my friends and then 17 to my parents. And so when I initially launched, I didn't really launch my YouTube channel. When I started making videos, I was pretty fresh out of that chapter of my life. And so at the time it was like really fun and interesting for me to talk about like tips for coming out to your classmates, like how to talk to your parents about being gay. All those things were very fresh in my experience and things I was really interested in. But as I got older, like into my late 20s, and I'd say like right around 30, that stuff, I don't know, kind of just felt like I was recycling the same thing over and over again. And what I think worked about my YouTube channel was I was following my passion. And my passion was leading in a direction that was like a lot more sexual than tips for talking to your teacher about being gay. And so I kind of pivoted my content more in that direction. And I think for my audience, it's like some people were like, oh, this isn't what I signed up for. Like I'm out. And especially like the 14, 15-year-old girls that were watching my YouTube channel, they were like, and we're done. But for the people that were excited to be on the journey with me, I think the prospect was like, look, I'm going to hold open this door and I don't know what we're going to discover, but we've been hanging out with each other for 5 or 10 years, like hold my hand and let's walk through this together and see what we find. And I think for some people that was really, really exciting.
How old were you when you were aware of, like, when the internet was there and you could like go on and actually search for stuff, watch videos and things?
Yeah. Oh, videos. Oh, we got the internet when I was 13. And I think video content, I think that was like that was YouTube. That was like 2007-ish, right? So 15 years ago, like probably 14 years ago, 15 years ago. So I was already an adult by that point, you know, I was in my early 20s.
Where did you go to discover or learn? Was there a place to learn about gay sex?
Yeah. Okay. So there were porn sites, and there wasn't like, I feel like porn's always on like the cutting edge of technology. So I do remember in college, having access to like the Sean Cody's of the world, like that kind of porn. And in absence of any meaningful sex education, like I learned how to have sex by watching SeanCody.com, which, you know, bless their hearts, is two straight guys like bumping their bodies together. Like it's not designed to teach you about pleasure or intimacy or connection. And I remember being in, I think it was my sophomore year of college, and I had just had sex with my boyfriend, and I was like covered in cum, and I was laying on the bed, and he was like, you know, I really like you, but like having sex with you is like being in a porn. And I was like, oh, you're welcome. Like, awesome. Like, mission accomplished. Like, that's great. And he was like, no, like, that's not a compliment. Like, that's not good. And I was like, what do you mean it's not good? Like, if I'm replicating what I'm seeing on the screen, like in my bed, like, you know, that's, that's great. And he was like, no, it's not. And it took me years after that to really realize what he meant. And I also, I mean, I love porn for what it is, but it isn't sex education, even though it's used as that by many people subconsciously or consciously. Yeah.
Well, I think you're right. I mean, especially for people who, I mean, growing up in Kansas, you know, we didn't have the internet at the time either, but today I see kids who are in either, if not religious, but very conservative families. And there aren't a lot of other, you know, gay kids. You know, the population is so low that the percentage is small and nobody's really out. I mean, now they are. It's different today than it was 5 or 10 years ago, but there was no other way for them to learn about what to do. And so when they would watch it, you know, it's like that was the only resource.
Yeah.
Describe for me, I want to lead up to Himeros and how it came to you, but what were the steps that happened before the light bulb?
Yeah, there were a few steps. I think mainly what was happening, there were a few things that were happening. Kind of like larger picture YouTube. Eventually, YouTube was bought by Google. And the way that a lot of people who create YouTube content make their money is through ads. And I very quickly was making a good living for myself through the ad revenue that my channel created. And that was great. Until YouTube realized that with their advertisers, Coca-Cola doesn't want to be advertising on a channel where someone's talking about butt plugs. You know, they had to distinguish content that was, less brand friendly from content that was like, you know, makeup tutorials, stuff that was really consumable. So each month I would see that my ad revenue, despite views going up, the ad revenue was getting smaller and smaller. And yeah, I was reaching this really niche market of gay men, and it's a desirable market. It's a market that people do want to reach. And so instead of relying on ad revenue, I was doing a lot of sponsored videos. So someone would basically buy product placement in my content. And that was great, but it also created a lot of pressure each quarter to kind of hit certain benchmarks that we set for ourselves. I had to have a full-time employee who would just go to conferences and network and sell sponsorships for my channel. And then if your view counts do go down, then you command less money. There was a lot of unknowns. And I mean, at any point, someone could just shut my channel down too. YouTube could be like, you know what, this is too borderline and we don't want to host this content. So there were also currents of there was a SESTA, I think, and FOSTA, which were two bills that were passed by Congress that held any platform accountable to any sex trafficking that happens on the site. And so the effect of that, well-intentioned, but the effect ended up being that like Craigslist had to get rid of personal ads, Tumblr got rid of porn because they didn't have the infrastructure in place to decide like if porn was consensual or not. All these different aspects of pornography on the internet kind of closed down. And YouTube, as a result of that, became even more restrictive. So the content I was making was edgier. There were all these financial headwinds that I was facing by continuing to make that content. And it just seemed like, okay, something needs to give here. And my employee at the time and I went on a retreat in Hawaii, and we were kind of joking around talking about ideas. And he was like, why don't you just like launch a porn site? And I was like, yeah. Why don't I just launch a porn? And then we both kind of just stopped and looked at each other. And we were like, oh, yeah, maybe I should launch a porn site. And that was kind of the first like conception of it, with the idea being leverage this audience that you have on YouTube into a subscription-based model, solves the financial issues. And then I can make the content that I've really always wanted to make without having to worry about someone censoring it, because you own the platform.
Was your idea and concept for the platform what it was from the get-go, or did it evolve into being what it is?
Like the mission of Himeros has always been consistent, to enhance the experience of sex and sexuality for gay and bisexual men through connection, intimacy, and pleasure. And what did evolve over the years, because we launched it 4 years ago now, is the way that we serve that content. Like initially it was little 2-minute video clips. The message was the same, but it was just packaged differently. We realized people wanted longer form content, like a lot of what we filmed in Hawaii. I mean, the one video that's come out was 30 minutes long. People wanted longer format. They want to see some of the things that they expect in traditional porn, like cum shots. They often want to see fucking when it's available. We had a learning curve of like how to deliver that message. And we're still, I think, figuring it out. So there's been a lot that's changed, but it's almost like, it's like experimentation. It's like we try different things. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. And then we just learn from it.
Well, and then there's a variety.
There is.
Of all the trials along the way. Tell me, what is the porn star Bill of Rights?
Yeah. Because our content requires a certain level of authenticity and vulnerability, it requires a little bit different of an approach. And it also means recognizing that in a lot of kind of mainstream porn, models aren't always treated very well. And they're going to bring that baggage to the table when they work with another studio. And so the Porn Star Bill of Rights was a way to kind of communicate to models that what we're doing is different. And it was a way to allow for the container for the models to be vulnerable and authentic. So it's things like free mental health support. When a model films with us, they get 5 counseling sessions after they film to help integrate some of the stuff that comes up. It means paying models fair wages. It means creating consensual filming environments. It means having sets that are drug and alcohol free. It's creating an environment that is conducive to what it is that we're trying to create. We started that from the beginning. And it's also, I think, for consumers when they're signing up for a porn site, we buy coffee that's fair trade. We buy organic produce. When we're consuming things, we're mindful and conscious of the process it took to create that thing. And porn is another thing that we consume. We're not eating it, but we're consuming it with our minds and our hearts. And I think for conscious consumers, it's also important for them to know how their porn was made.
Any of the performers comment on, wow, I can't believe this is so great. Were they sort of surprised or because they maybe weren't treated so well on previous experiences?
Yeah, I think they're most surprised at the mental health support. Because when I interview a model, I communicate, here's your compensation and here's what you're going to get, and you get these counseling sessions, and they're often, the reaction is, wow, what, really? Like, wow. And I would say probably half of the models probably take us up on it and use those counseling sessions. And it doesn't have to be to talk about stuff that they experience on the film set, though. It could be like, oh, I explored this aspect of my sexuality and I don't know how to integrate it. They can use it to get support in general for, you know, doing sex work or escorting. They can talk about whatever they want, and we pay the bill. But if you look at, I mean, mental health obviously is something that's been put more in the spotlight as of late. But it seems like every month it's like a different porn star that we lose to suicide. And these men are really being asked to carry the collective shadow of, you know, our community in a lot of ways. So it feels like supporting them is an important thing to do.
Davey Wavey. Another great guest is filmmaker Bruce LaBruce.
Like all art, you know, 90% of it is bad art, but I appreciate it still as an art form. However, in my career, I've always been caught sort of in the middle between pornography and art. People in the art world think my products are too pornographic, and people in the porn world are very skeptical of me, and they think I'm an artist who's kind of intruding or kind of exploiting porn.
You can hear my full interview with Bruce LaBruce in the archives at filmmakingconfidential.com or by subscribing for free to this podcast. We'll be right back with Davey Wavey. Stay with us. Now, back to our conversation with Davey Wavey.
I've encouraged every filmmaker that I know to do something, any kind of an adult erotic activity, just because it, I think, informs them of other choices they would make in things that are fictional. But what I found really compelling was how safe and nurturing was the environment. And I think safer than most non-adult movies. Are you conscious of that? And I know you make it happen, but have you been on film sets that are non-adult related and just looked around at how disorganized or not safe they are sometimes?
Yeah, the kind of more mainstream commercial stuff that I've seen or experienced, it feels often like people are just there to kind of get a check. And I think what's different is that there's so much heart and soul in what we're doing. So people show up in a different way. Like, people are really present and they're really focused, and they're there because they believe in it. I think it's just like, it's what's really required to create the videos that we create. I mean, sometimes we shot stuff in Hawaii where like people are crying in a scene. So I think it's like kind of a testament to the quality of individuals that we work with, like on the crew side. And a lot of that credit goes to like in Hawaii, we work with Brad Amberhart, who's a tantric sex coach. And I think he really like sets the tone and kind of lays it all out for everyone. And we've definitely worked with crew who hasn't been like so attentive and clued in, and then I just don't hire them again. So it's like, you know.
Well, you know, the really cool thing about Brad was that some of the things that he said were super inspiring. I mean, just as a human being, you know, I mean, just about the way that our culture over time has made the shame and all the judgmental reaction to feeling, let alone sensuality nor sexuality, but just like actually having a feeling, you know, in your body, you know, or your mind or your heart. And to embrace that, I thought, I mean, there were a couple of times when he was speaking and we were filming that I was a little weeping, but like, I didn't want to show anyone, you know, but it was so good.
Yeah, he's really special. He's a really special human being. I think day 4 was the day that was like particularly impactful for me. We were there for 5 days. And I was like, how fucking like lucky are we as humans to just have Brad on this planet with us, that like we share this world with him. He's almost like an alien. Like, he's so clued into some like higher realm or reality. And he's just really special. So I was feeling pretty emotional that day.
Was that the fire day?
Let's see. It was the day that we did Three's Company, where the models were like talking to camera. I don't know if that was the same day or not. It might have been. I don't know. It's all a blur.
It is. I but with every shoot, I mean, that's one thing that's so amazing on the movie that I directed in September or October, whenever that was. We did so much in such a short amount of time that every time there was magic, there was just a little bit of time to, embrace that and celebrate that magic before you were doing the next thing.
Yeah.
And it was a little bit like that. So it's like one big memory. I can't really quite differentiate between which magical moment happened when or before the after the other, but it was pretty great. I mean, I love stuff like that.
There's a lot of magical moments.
Let's talk about the word porn. Like, here's my feeling. Because I feel like it comes with the baggage of judgment, that I think there needs to be another word that may or may never catch on.
Yeah.
But what do you feel about it?
Yeah, it's tough. I feel it's complicated because I love porn, and a lot of the folks that we work with consider themselves pornographers or porn stars. And when I say like what we do doesn't quite feel like porn, it sounds like I'm trying to make a hierarchy when I'm not. Like, it's not that it's like what we're serving is a different flavor, like you can enjoy strawberry flavor and you can enjoy chocolate, and it's like, it's not necessarily better or worse. So when I say, I don't know that it's porn, I'm not saying it because I think what we do is so high and mighty. It just feels like we're, for me, porn, the intent in porn is to get you off. Like, that's how I would define pornography, is by its intention. And I think the intention in what we do, I know the intention in what we do is like to connect you with intimacy, to teach you about your body, to teach you about pleasure. It's different. And yet, like, I know if my mom were to see like the video we filmed in Hawaii, she'd be like, oh, that's gay porn, like, so
what do you call, so people who, for instance, if there's an explicit sex scene in a movie, in a non-adult specific movie, or if there's an explicit piece of art and they say, oh, that's pornographic, that's porn.
Right.
Yet it's not designed to get you off.
Right.
How's,
right.
And so it's like, it's so confusing. I think that, well, I say to people that what you're doing is, how I would describe what you're doing is the evolution of where adult erotica goes, and again, I like how you said it was about like sort of just a different flavor, because if you're just here and you're on a tree and there's all these branches, it's all the same tree, but each branch could be a totally different defined area.
Right. And you can like one flavor. Like, I like the flavor what we create more than I like another scene of two guys in a hotel room, like rubbing their bodies together, so for me, this is a better flavor, but it doesn't mean that one's fundamentally better or worse than the other, objectively. And sometimes I'll say, oh, we create erotic videos or erotica, because that maybe sounds like a little bit more artistic to people. Like, if I'm trying to explain what we do to someone that doesn't have any context, porn isn't necessarily isn't going to be the word that like gets there. But you're right. We need a better word for it. I'm open to it. So wants to end one.
I if I compare to like Paul Morrissey, who shot 3 films for Andy Warhol, which starred Joe D'Alessandro, all were explicit and had actual sex in them. Yet those are considered highbrow art. And I wonder why. And is it because Andy went in and he presented it differently? Probably not. I'm sure Andy Warhol used the word.
Right. It's just because it's Andy Warhol, and now people have to be like, oh yeah, this is highbrow.
Well, it was really cool. So this morning when I was having my coffee, I noticed, I looked at the BBC News, which I do every now and again. I don't do it every day, but there was this article in ancient Pompeii and all of the explicit erotica art that was preserved in time. And they had this little video about before the Christianity came around, there were things like phalluses that were put over people's doors to like, warn off evil spirits. And it was like used as a talisman and stuff. And we all know about ancient Rome and ancient Greece. Prostitution was legal and taxable. It was like a legal taxable practice.
Right.
Do you think our culture is on the way to returning to something where pleasure and sexuality isn't disapproved of? Like going back to the way it was back then?
Yeah. I don't know. I mean, certainly if we look at the course of human history, that these things come and go in waves. And so obviously where we're at now is changing and evolving. It feels like my experience with technology has been that the platforms have become increasingly restrictive. So it's not like YouTube is loosening up their policies on nudity. In fact, it's the opposite. I suspect at some point Twitter might get rid of porn. Remember, for a couple of days, OnlyFans got rid of porn. The trend that I see, at least in the platforms and technology that we use, is more restriction and less nudity. And yet it seems like the appetite for those things, like within the public itself, it seems to be maybe expanding. It's like young people today, like everyone has nude pictures of themselves. Like at some point we're going to have a president of the United States who has nude pictures that leaked. So
or that even might be just framed on the wall at the White House.
I don't know about that.
Well, at some point, I'm not saying in our lifetimes, maybe. But
yeah. So it seems to be going into like opposing directions at the same time.
So interesting to me, because I also see it in Hollywood movies where it's also happening where you're either getting really, really explicit or absolutely not, like at all.
Yeah,
on the other side of it.
Yeah, I mean, the White Lotus, I think is the first episode, they show like a full-on dick, and I'm like, oh, this is awesome, this is exciting. And then on YouTube I get in trouble because someone's touching their nipple. It's and now that I'm started, I can show someone getting in a fight and punching someone in the nipple or ripping someone's nipple off or shooting someone in the nipple, and that's fine. But I can't show someone pleasuring a nipple because that's bad. That's when I start to get unraveled. That's where I start to get lost.
That's absolutely right and insane. I mean, I can't even.
Yeah.
How is that okay?
Right. That's when I get unhinged, because it's like, yeah, you can hurt someone, you can cause someone pain. That's okay. But you can't cause someone pleasure. That's bad.
Yeah, that's so weird. Talk to me about how you approach a shoot, like organization wise, producing wise, because I think it's the same for anybody who's about to do anything, whether it's even still photography or, an indie film or commercial. But like, how do you sit down and organize yourself?
Yeah. So our process is always evolving. Where we're at right now is generally it takes about a year to plan a shoot. So we're scheduling stuff for, around next year at this time. And the first thing I'll do is I'll find a tantric coach that or a sex coach or sexologist that we want to work with. And we'll decide on some sort of like overarching theme for the project, which is usually done in conjunction with finding a location. And we usually do that through like Airbnb, but we're very transparent with folks about like what we're doing and what we're filming, because we don't want to be looking over our shoulder. Again, it's about creating an environment of safety. When we were in Hawaii, for sure, everyone at the retreat center knew what we were doing and was like super on board with it. In fact, they were like delighted, if you remember, that we were there. So we'll find a place to film. We'll find some sort of concept. It could be like, hey, we're going to do a project around reclaiming like sacred symbols and religious narratives for our sex. Like that could be the big umbrella theme. And then we'll develop usually 12 videos that we're going to film over the course of 4 days, 12 concepts. Sometimes those are really detailed and sometimes they're a little bit more open-ended. In Hawaii, of course, we did it differently. We had a whole different approach, which was we created the concepts on site with the participants. That's not what we usually do. Usually we kind of go in knowing what we're going to do. And then I began the process of building a team around that. Like, what director do we want to work with? What cinematographer do we want to work with? What models we work with? What will we do from an audio perspective? What are our needs going to be here? Are we going to be somewhere really remote where we need a production assistant? Can we do this ourselves? What's our budget? And then we just kind of go from there. But it takes about a year to plan it all.
Do you have sponsors or people that invest in the different retreats or different shoots independently of other income coming from the platform?
No. So it's all based on the subscriptions of Himeros members. Though initially when I started filming, because the site hadn't launched, we had to do like a year's worth of filming. I used my own money from YouTube to like fund that content because I just didn't want to I wanted it to be like my vision and to really have fun with it and not to have to like be accountable to someone else. So yeah, there's no other, right now it's entirely supported through the membership.
That's good. It's always good to keep it that way because you're right. Even if the quote unquote people who are investing aren't necessarily involved or producing, there's that fine line between you either end up doing it their way or right. or you have that sort of internal, oh, I should please them. So
right.
So you're always thinking about somebody else other than yourself.
Yeah. But I do think that about the audience sometimes, like, okay, is this something that's going to resonate with the audience? And sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes the content we make is, we did a video that came out a few weeks ago called Evil Impulse. And that was a miss for the majority of the audience. But I always feel like if everything that we film is like landing entirely within folks' like comfort zone, then we're not swinging big enough. Do you know what I mean? Like I'm okay with missing some of them because it means that we're trying things that are edgy and hitting people's boundaries.
Did I see that you did a satire or sort of a parody on The Shining?
Yeah, we did do a parody of The Shining. Yeah. That's it. So The Shining is my favorite film. So I was like, oh, we just have to do this.
Totally. So tell me about it.
We were in like this really old mansion in North Carolina. And so we've always toyed with the idea of doing some sort of gay porn, horror genre, something. And what I always struggle with in that is I think gay men are already afraid of their sex enough that like they've been told it's conduit for like death, disease, and eternal damnation. Like you're going to get AIDS, you're going to go to hell, you're going to get an STD. We're already afraid of it enough. So this was kind of our playful way to like touch on a horror genre. But it's really more kind of like tongue in cheek. Like we have the twins from The Shining, but it's just two porn stars and they're like, come and play with us. And we have the red tricycle and the carpet pattern from The Shining. We have that, like there's a lot of Easter eggs in it. It's cute.
Cool. And you release that at Halloween?
Yeah, we release at Halloween. And sometimes, I mean, what I've learned from a lot of those kind of videos is that sometimes when there's a lot of production elements to it, you can get lost in that and forget about the intimacy. And so I think that was an example where it was like we were so focused on getting like all these shots that we wanted that when the video all kind of came together at the end, we're like, oh yeah, and there's like sex in it, but the sex was kind of an afterthought. Whereas like I think my favorite video from Hawaii is the one that came out, Three's Company. It's two guys in a room with a bed with no sheets. It's like stripped down, simple. Like it couldn't be an easier setup. And yet that's when we had like the most profound like depictions of connection and intimacy. And so I think it allowed, when all that stuff is stripped away, sometimes you can really settle into the pleasure and the connection and those other elements.
Totally. My favorite thing about that was, we can see something and we can hear it, but we can't feel it or taste it or smell it. So what I found most provocative about it and most inspiring was the sharing of those other senses about what was going on.
Right. Yeah, totally. I think you could watch that video without seeing it at all and still have like a really profound experience. Mm-hmm. You could just listen to it as like a podcast. And
what a great idea.
And be like, oh, this is fucking hot.
I feel dirty. I feel your legs around my hips. I feel your weight.
Feel my body pressed against yours.
I can hear the breeze and the trees outside. And birds. I want more of this.
When you're picking a sex coach or a tantric coach or any kind of a sensual therapist or an intimacy coordinator, tell me about the differences between their styles and also their own interests of things they like to teach and share.
Yeah. Oh, well, I'll start with that. So that when we think of like, oh, what's the theme for this shoot? That comes from the coach, not from me, because I would rather have them work on a project that is like resonating with their passion than mine. Because then they're going to put the energy and effort and love into it. So it's like, okay, what's really alive for you right now, Brad? What seems really exciting for you, or whoever the coach is. And what I love is we've probably worked with a dozen different coaches and each one has a different flavor. Brad is, like I said, an alien. You know, he's very connected to nature in his approach, spiritual. There's other coaches like Will Tantra is a coach that we work with. He's very practical. Everything that we film with him is some practical application that you can apply to the sex that you're having. And it's informative and it's easy to absorb. It's like, here's a way to have multiple orgasms. You know, you do X, Y, and Z, and here's how you practice doing it. And then other coaches like Finn Deerhart is kind of more like academic based, like it's more based in kind of theory and whatever book might be really alive for him that he's reading based in archetypes and mythology. So everyone kind of has this different flavor. And what I love about Himeros is that it's almost like this cornucopia or this like smorgasbord. You get to, or it's like a poo-poo platter, you know, it's like you get to try a little bit of this and a little bit of that. And if you find a coach that you really like, then a lot of these coaches have workshops and programs that you can, you know, join outside of Himeros. But it gives you a tasting for a really wide spectrum of what's available. We did a retreat that wasn't filmed in October at Easton Mountain, upstate New York. I think it was like 45 people. And so we had the coaches from Himeros, and then it was just people, members, anyone who bought a ticket could go and participate in the workshops. Yeah, that feels like a really important piece for people to have.
I think it sounds cool.
Yeah, it is. It is really cool.
Tell me about some of the other topics when you began to make any kind of content, whether it was on Himeros or your YouTube channel, that was meant to be educational, or to at least say, today we're going to talk about XYZ. Can you tell us some of those topics or some of those things that either aren't talked about and you wanted to share with people?
Yeah, like I think one of my most popular YouTube videos is how to anal douche, you know, and that's like the perfect example of something that's really important to gay men, but not something that's often talked about. And it is like a science and an art, you know, like it's not something that's intuitive. And there's all these things to know, like how to get the extra water out and like, you know, the different types of douches that are available. And here's what my experience has been. So that's been the kind of content that's like really fun to create on YouTube. And I think that formula of like, okay, we're going to take something informative, some truth, and we're going to package it in a way that's funny or silly or sexy. Like we basically do that with Himeros. We take these good messages at their core and package it in a porn, which people enjoy seeing. And I think like at the end of the video, they might have jerked off to it, but hopefully they've also learned something too.
I think that's the important part is, I mean, in all the sexual experiences I've ever had, only a handful seem to actually be there consciously. You know, like right. Typically it's they're not even present, you know, and they don't really know what they're doing. Right. Yeah. And yet it's this huge part of our existence and our life. And we spend so much energy thinking about sex. And yet most of us are so like ill-equipped to experience any of it. Yeah. I mean, everything that you've talked about should be taught in school so that we don't have to go and hunt for the wrong answers everywhere else. Right. Yeah.
And it won't be. It's not. So
right. Well, that's why you're here.
Yeah. We wouldn't have Hemorrhoes.
Lucille, do you have a question?
Oh, I do actually. I was listening to the conversation, and it made me sort of think. I mean, what are the sort of future plans for Hemorrhoes? Do you have any sort of thoughts on whether you would expand it into more of a media company, and if like things sort of went south with YouTube? You're already investing in the documentary space, so like, would it ever be more than just what it is now?
Yeah. I'm always like open to the possibilities of what can come out of it. I think something that actually comes up a lot is like, oh, is there like a straight version of this? Is there a lesbian version of this? And I think there is. I just don't have the passion myself to like to spearhead that, you know? And or like the I don't know, even the knowledge base to do like a straight version of Hemorrhoes. Though I would love for someone else to like run with that, to like take what we're doing and like apply that in a different circumstance. I think for us, like, it depends on a lot of things. Like, as our membership audience continues to grow, like what they're interested in seeing. We've had a really good response with the docs that you've done. Like, people really enjoy seeing that. And I had a concern that once people saw like how the sausage was made, or learn more about like the models that we feature, that they were going to be like less willing to watch porns that they're in, you know? And it's kind of been the opposite reaction, that it gives people another layer of who that person is, who that model is. And so it makes consuming that porn like even more interesting, because now they know what that model is bringing to it.
I think that's pretty important. And also I want to talk about how typically most any consumption of adult media is dark and hidden and sort of noir, and, you know, let's turn off the lights and hide in the darkness. Whereas your platform and Hemorrhoes is all bright and white, and let's turn the lights on and embrace it.
Right. It's, yeah, that was by design too. It's like our colors are like white and gold. It's about like taking things out of the shadow and into the light. Yeah, that's the idea.
You've also done travel blogging. When was that?
Yeah, that was when I was like making an effort to be a little bit more brand friendly. And we were working with some tourism boards. That ship has sailed by virtue of me doing porn now. So I'm like officially tainted from a brand standpoint. I can only work with now like dating apps, sex toy companies, and like pharmaceuticals that target gay men. But there was a time when I was doing tourism stuff, and it was fun to kind of dabble in, but it was also like, oh, this isn't my thing. Like, it's fun to travel and share that, but you're not really present when you're traveling and filming stuff and creating content. So it was kind of like, oh, this is a good gig, but this isn't what I want to do. When I'm creating content for Hemorrhoes, as exhausting as it is, I'm like, oh, this is the thing that I'm not supposed to. There's no one up there that's like, oh, we created Davey Wavey so that he could bestow his porn on the world. It's not that. It's just like, this is the perfect intersection of my skill sets and my passions.
Where do you see it going?
Yeah, I don't fucking know. I think we're just going to continue to push the envelope with the content that we create, different approaches, continuing to work with awesome instructors. I think there's a bigger in-person piece that we haven't really developed much. We started to, and then the pandemic hit, but we had our first in-person retreat in October. And we're going to do another one next year. And then hopefully in 2023, we'll do a couple retreats. So I think it's going to be like finding ways to take what's happening on the screen off the screen for folks. And yeah, I don't know. I think 4 years ago would not have ever seen it being what it is today. So it's kind of like, I don't have the level of imagination necessary to kind of like foresee where all of this may lead. I have no idea, but I've got my popcorn and I'm along for the ride.
producer, pioneer, Davey Wavey. For more information, visit himeros.tv. Tune in next time for more Filmmaking Confidential. It is totally free to subscribe, and when you subscribe, you'll get upcoming new episodes automatically, and you'll have free access to all our past shows. The Filmmaking Confidential podcast is a production of Dekenga Audio and produced by myself and Ella Spencer. Our original theme music is composed by Kevin Robles. For more of the Filmmaking Confidential podcast, head over to filmmakingconfidential.com. If you have a question about filmmaking you'd like me to answer on the podcast, send me an email using the contact form on the website. To learn more of my filmmaking secrets, be sure to pick up a copy of the book, Filmmaking Confidential, available on Audible, paperback, and ebook, wherever books are sold. I'm Steve Balderson. Thanks for listening and spreading the word. Until next time, keep making, keep doing, keep going.